Hello, awesome developers. Today we are diving into the world of Next.js to learn how to protect routes using the new app router. If you have ever wondered how to make certain pages accessible only to the logged in users, you are in the right place. We will build a simple example where you can log in to see a protected dashboard page. By the end of this video, you will have a fully working solution using the React context, and also we'll be using Tailwind CSS for basic styling and TypeScript. And if you're not familiar with TypeScript, again, this is also valid for your coding using JavaScript as well. So let's jump right into it. In here, I generated an application using create next app, which is very simple. And all what I have done, I just clean up everything. Okay, so my page is empty, my layout is still there, and also I removed the CSS because I don't need it for today's demo. Now, first thing we want to do is we need to create the auth context. We will manage this authentication state using React Context API. So first thing I will want to do is create a context folder. And this is just for better hierarchy, okay? You are free to do any way it suits you, but these are the common methods used. So I'll create a context folder inside my app, and in here I'll create my context, and I will call it auth context.tsx. Okay, so if using JavaScript, it will be .gsx. Now, first thing we have to do is the context usually, because we'll be using hooks and state management. Even if we are on Next.js, this will be a client-side component or function. So we have to make sure on the top we will mention that this is a client-side piece of code we are writing here. Okay, so we'll use the use client. Next thing I want to do is import a few things. So we need React, of course. We need create context because we'll be creating a context. Then we want also the use state, and this will import them from React. Great. Now we have to create our context. Again, if you are not familiar with context, I have full tutorial that explains context API, how it works step by step as well. And the way it works is usually you create your context, will be the bucket which holds some information, and you wrap your app within that context. So your app have access to whatever details are stored in that context you created. So first thing we need to do is create that bucket. I will call it auth context, and you can call it anything you like. And we say create context that we imported from React, and you can give it an initial value. For me, it will be undefined. Okay, and again, because I'm using TypeScript, I need to add an interface to my context. If you're using JavaScript, you can skip this step. So I'll define an interface. I'll call it auth context type, and that will have few values. So in my context, I'll create a function which is for login, and then I'll create a function for logout, and also I want a state which will be a boolean to track for me if the user is authenticated or not. So I'll create this interface. The first thing is authenticated, and you can call them anything you like, and this one will be a boolean. The next thing, I will be creating a function that I need to access from my app to login. So that will be a function which doesn't accept any argument and give me back a void. And also same for the logout. So it will be a function that doesn't return anything for me too. So this way, when you create your context, you know what things you're expecting to have. Okay, so I will add here my tab. So auth context type or undefined. As you see, we took undefined as a default value for our context when we created. So we have to handle that type as well. Now we created our context, we will create this provider that will help us to provide or wrap our app within this context and make these elements available to us through our application. So step number 2, we are creating our provider. So I'll define it, export const. I'll call it AuthProvider. Again, you can call this thing anything you like, but it's just a standard to use. For example, context, when you create a context, when you're creating its provider, you do the name and then provider. So it is meaningful when someone come and read your code within your team. So export const auth provider, okay, and that will be a functional component. We should accept a property or a prop of children, okay, and then it will give us back a few things. Now again, because I'm using TypeScript, I need to add an interface here. So I will say this is type of React dot functional component, and this functional component accept a prop. So I have to define the type for that prop, which is children, and to be of type React dot React node. Nice. Now we defined our provider, and now let's get into action. So we said we need a state that will track for us, the user, if it's authenticated or not. So I'll create a state called const, and I'll call is authenticated. And then I need a setter function. Set is authenticated. And the default value, we will set it to false, of course, until use state until someone really click and authenticate. Okay, so false. And also I'll define those functions I need for login and logout. Okay, so const login arrow function, and usually here you'll have to make, for example, um, some API call or whatever that you need to authenticate the users, okay? But for today, the mosaic, I'm not having any API, so I'll just be hard coding everything. But the setup and the shell, this is how it should be, okay? Now, all what I will do now is say is set is authenticated to true. So usually you'll do this after you do your API call is successful and come back with 200 response, then you will do this step. Okay. Now, next thing I want to do is define my logout. Also same thing as well. Usually he will do some API call to log out the user, and also, for example, if you have any cookies in your session or anything, you have to remove them as well, or anything in your local storage as well. So here, clean up your local storage, for example, or your cookies, or whatever API calls to be made. Okay, when all that's done and successful, then we'll just switch our state. So set is authenticated to false. Great. Now we created our state, we created the functions we need. Now let's actually return this provider. So return, and I'll say auth context, okay, which we created right there, and we can access something dot provider, okay, and this usually accepts a property called value, okay, and value, this is what your app will have access to, and I know through my app I will need to access the state, I need to access the login and the logout function, so those are the properties. I'll make them today available for me. So is authenticated, the login, and the logout as well. Great, and then that will wrap our components or our app, so children will go right inside our auth context provider. Great, now next thing I want to do is, which is not mandatory but it's good practice, is create a hook that usually will help us to access this context through our application very easily. So what I will do, I'll create a hooks folder, and then I'll create a hook. I'll call it auth auth.ts. Okay, and inside here, all what I will do is define a hook. I'll call it use auth. You can call it anything you like, and then you have to import a use context from React. So I'm going to import it. Okay, so basically use context will allow you to use any context we created. As you can see here, we use create to create one. Now we'll use a use context from React to actually use it. And then you can have access to the auth context that we created right there. And what I will do here, I'll export it so I can have access to it from another file. And then I'll just go ahead and import it as well. And that's here, we are done. So we create our context, we create a hook that can help us to actually access that context and use it anywhere we want in our application. Now, next thing we want to do is let's create a reusable protected route component, okay? And we'll be using the method of higher order component. So what I will do, I'll create a new folder called HOC, and inside here I'll create a component called protected route.tsx. Okay, and of course this one also needs to be a client-side component, so I will need to use the use client, and then I'll go ahead and import the hook I created. So import use auth from the hook I created earlier, and we'll import a few things like the use router and use effect because we need them as well, and you'll see later why. So import use router from Next navigation, and also we'll import use effect from React. Great. Now let's define our component. We'll call const protected route. Okay, and that will have a property of children. And again, because I'm using React, I need to add an interface. So this is a type of React functional component, and it accepts a property of children, which is of type React.React node. Great. Now let's come inside, and first thing is I want to access the property that I created in my contact, which is authenticated. So is authenticated, and that will be coming from my hook use auth. And then I will define an instance of my route, so const router, or call it anything you like, that will be equal to use router that we imported from Next navigation. So this one will help us, to manage the routes. If you want to push someone to another page or go back or whatever, you use the use router for that. Now we'll define our use effect, and this use effect will accept a dependency array which depends on few elements. So I want this to run every time my router changes. Okay, for example, you navigate between pages, or if there is authenticated, that Boolean value that I know if a user is authenticated. So if that one has changed, I need this use effect also to rerun again and double check that if the user is authenticated or not. Now, I would say if I'm not authenticated, then I don't want the current user to see my current page because that page is protected and it's only for login pages. So I'll say router.push, and I'll push them back, for example, to a login page. Okay, so they have to log in first. Now, that was my use effect here. It just makes sure that whenever we are not authenticated, take user out of current page and take them to the login page to log in. Now, after our use effect, what we want to do is if I'm not as authenticated, okay, now I'm returning here null. But this is optional, okay? You can here, for example, add a loading spinner or anything else you want to do depending on your requirements. Otherwise, if all is good and all is happy, just return my page, okay, or my component. So just return the children. And then we'll expose our component. So export default protected routes. Great. So we create our context, which help us to track the user if they are authenticated or not. Then we created a protected route that will protect our pages that we want them to be only for logged in users. Now let's demo this and let's create a page for logging. So I'll create a login page. So login, then page.tsx. Again, this will need to be a client side component because we'll be using custom hooks. And also, this is very simple for now. We also imported the use auth we created, and we are accessing the login, and we just display a button so user can click it to log in. Okay, simple as that. Now, let's create our protected dashboard page, which we have done all this work for. Now, I'll create a new page called dashboard, and then I'll create a new component called page.tsx, and I will define my component now right here. Again, also this is very simple. So this is our protected dashboard. We imported that protected route we created. Also, we imported the custom hook we create for authentication. Then here we're just accessing the logout function we want from the hook. Now, this is very simple page. You just say welcome to dashboard, and you have a logout button as well there to display. So if the users want to log out, they can easily log out. Then we are actually here exporting a new component, which is a wrapper of our dashboard. And all what it does is it wrap our dashboard component with the protected route, component we created earlier. Okay, so that's how you can protect your actual route in Next.js. Now, and this is the one we're making it available by default for our page and not the actual components here. So you can see here we have the export default, and here we are just defining our components. We are not exporting it or anything like that. Now, we did all these things. One more step we need to do is wrap our app with the AuthProvider. You remember earlier we said we create the context and we have to wrap all our app within that context. So we have access to all these values. Now it is time to go and do it. So we'll go to our layout because that's the one wrapping all our app. And what we will do, we'll import first that AuthProvider we created, AuthProvider. And then we'll just come down here and wrap our app within that. So auth provider, and then we'll just render our children just like that. Very simple and very easy. Now let's go ahead and test this. So I'll just open my UI and access my app. So here this is blank because we didn't manage the first route. But what I will do now, I'm not logged in. I will go and try to access my dashboard because it's loading. And there we go. You can see first thing is that you don't have that welcome to dashboard or logout button. You can see only the login button. And if you look at the route here, it actually reroute me back to the login page because I'm not authenticated. Okay, and that is the code we did right there. So I'm not authenticated. Basically, just push me to the login page. Now let's go ahead and log in. So I'll just click the login button. Because we didn't do anything with it, like when you log in, take me back to where I came from, anything like that. We didn't manage that scenario yet. So it doesn't take me anywhere, but I clicked it, so I'm logged in. What I can do, I just click the back arrow basically and take me back to dashboard. And you can see here, it knows I'm logged in and says, welcome to the dashboard. If you go ahead and click log out, then you're logged out and you take you back to the login page. Now, if I go and click this, see, it's not allowing me to access the dashboard because I am logged out now. Okay. Now, there you have it. We have built a fully functional authentication system with protected routes in Next.js using the app router. So go ahead and try it out. You can enhance this project by integrating a real authentication API for login and logout. If you enjoyed this tutorial, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. See you in the next video.